You were a bad boy.
You know, I took that from Amanda. I think Amanda started doing that at some point. She set an alarm and talks to stop herself.
Well, you were stopping someone else.
Yeah.
You were mandating that the time allotment would be on.
I was a little stricter.
He just told you to turn it off, and I'll wrap up quickly, which he did not.
More highly strung when I started than I am now. I'm not going to cut you off like that.
You'll find him more something. I think that would be good. So we have 3 colleagues from the community.
So
St. John's?
Yeah, so there's yeah, exactly. So Falake is joining us.
Yeah.
And then there's Zainab Jarrett, who's she has a PhD. Constanza and who's a musician.
That'd be interesting.
Okay, wherever you like.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Otherwise, there's a
there.
risk of an academic community divide.
Yeah, I'm tired. You're going to get us all at our best.
Yeah. Well, it's good to start with like something you have in common, right? That's
Tiredness.
tiredness. Yeah.
I just want to let you know we're going to start in about 3 minutes or less because we're already over time. So I'd ask you to take a seat, grab your coffees, take a seat as swiftly as you can, and we'll get rolling in a few moments.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you.
I'm Keith.
And Constanza?
Constanza. I'm Nils. Nice to meet you.
Mail?
Nils.
Nails.
Yeah.
Okay.
Scott, we met online.
Hi,
Hi, Alva. How are you?
good, thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Please join us.
Hi.
How are you
Thank
doing?
you. Thank you.
Hi. I'm Keith. Nice to meet you.
Oh,
I forgot. You guys good to go? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I will do the intro.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Welcome aboard Immigration and the Role of Trust, Integration and Social Cohesion in Building Communities. I'm Kathy Newhook. I've met lots of you throughout the week. We have been attending the conference at the main campus. Of course, some of you are joining from the public. So I just introducing myself again. Kathy Newick, I'm the manager of public policy and communications for Memorial University's Leslie Harris Center for Regional Policy and Development. And we're very pleased to be able to partner with the Department of Political Science as well as the Good Integration Project at the Arctic University of Norway on this event. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. There's coffee and tea in the back. Feel free to grab some if you haven't already. And in case of emergencies, exits are located through the main doors or at the bottom of the stairs as you go through these doors here. Washrooms, there is an accessible gender neutral single stall washroom just outside the main doors. There are more washrooms located down the hall. You turn left and left again. We have an excellent panel lined up for you today. Dr. Scott Matthews, Associate Professor with the Department of Political Science, has graciously agreed to moderate the panel. And we have about 90 minutes for the full session. The first 40 minutes or so, Scott will facilitate the discussion with the panelists, aimed at unearthing some key points of the discussion. And this, of course, for those of you who are at the conference all week, will build upon, I'm sure, the discussion that was happening there. Then we'll also have 25 or 30 minutes at the end of the panel discussion for questions from the audience. We also have a couple of little things. There's a flyer for an event that Zainab, one of our panelists, let me know about. It's a multiculturalism day celebration day happening on Tuesday. So if you're in town, there's some information around. And we also have information about the Global Arctic Leadership Initiative funding. If you're interested in that as a researcher, make sure you can chat with me after the session, or Lisa, who is here as well from the Harris Center. She's raising her hand in the back, so just pin one of us down at the reception afterwards, and we can chat about what opportunities are there. So before we begin, I want to take a few moments to reflect and acknowledge where we are today and the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated. They're in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups. We acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. And we encourage everyone to reflect on these lands where you are located this morning, or this afternoon, sorry, for those of you who are online, and wherever you're coming from, and to consider the Indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territory. This is particularly important for us as we engage in our panel discussion here today and think more about the role of trust, social integration, and social cohesion and integration in our communities. So on that note, I'll pass things over to Scott to introduce our panelists.
Is this on? Oh, yes, it is. So good afternoon, everyone. Hi there. So I'm going to start by introducing each of our panelists, and I'll just go from my right to my left. So first, on the furthest right is Dr. Zainab Jarrett, who is the Executive Director of the Tombolo Multicultural Festival, founder and CEO of We Care Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador, and the owner-operator of International Food and Craft Expo, Inc. Originally from Nigeria, Dr. Jarrett arrived in St. John's 30 years ago to attend Memorial University as a graduate student in folklore, where she received her PhD in 1998. In 2022, she received the Outstanding Community Service Award at Memorial's annual Tribute Awards ceremony. And just next to Zainab is Dr. Keith Banting from Queen's University. Keith is a professor emeritus in the Department of Political Studies and Stauffer Dunning Fellow in the School of Policy Studies at Queen's. His research interests focus on public policy in Canada and other contemporary democracies. He has had a long-standing interest in the politics of social policy and has extended this research to include ethnic diversity, immigration, and multiculturalism. Professor Banting is a member of the Order of Canada and a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada. And closest to me on my right is Dr. Niels Holtuk. Dr. Holtuk is a professor at the University of Copenhagen in the Department of Communication. His primary research areas are in political philosophy, specifically prioritarianism, migration, identity politics, secularism, social cohesion, population ethics, and global justice. His most recent book, The Politics of Social Cohesion, Immigration, Community, and Justice, talks about the impact of immigration on social cohesion and egalitarian redistribution. Holtuk argues that the effects of immigration on social cohesion do not need to compromise social justice, and that core principles of liberty and equality are the normative basis for just policies of immigration and integration. And on my left, nearest to me first, is Falake Oluwakun. Falake Oluwakun is a PhD candidate in the Ethics and Public Affairs program at Carleton University. She holds a BSc in political science from Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria and an MA in citizenship education from the University of London. In 2021, she completed her master's in public ethics at St. Paul University, where her research examined Canada's immigration policy, moral obligations, and global justice. Falake's current research focuses on the role of trust in Black immigrant integration in liberal democratic states. And next to Falake is Constanza Safatle, who is a commercial lawyer, or what I should say rather was a commercial lawyer in her home country of Chile. But when she moved to Newfoundland and Labrador, she was no longer able to practice her profession. Instead, she had to carve out a new life for herself as an immigrant here in the province. While working full-time in the not-for-profit sector, she built Newborn Lander, a successful social enterprise that manufactures baby accessories while creating employment opportunities for newcomer women. She will be featured as a contestant on CBC's Dragon's Den later this year. Ms. Safatle is currently the executive director at Task Force NL and was the recipient of the 2021 ANC Bridget Foster Cultural Business Icon Award and the 2022 NLOWE Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And last but not least is Alla Melnichuk, who is an award-winning concert pianist from Ukraine. She graduated from Kharkiv National University of Arts and has been teaching piano for more than a decade. She arrived in Canada in May 2022 with the first plane load of Ukrainian refugees and settled in St. John's, where she continues to teach piano both online and to students across Europe and in person in the Halliday Music Studio. She and local musician Maria Cherwick have formed a duo called Sunflower, the national flower of Ukraine, and they perform regularly in St. John's. So we have a kind of structured round of questions first, and I'll start with, in this first round, with a question for each of our panelists. And I will ask you to keep your responses to roughly 3 to 5 minutes. And hopefully I won't have to try and enforce that, but I'm ready to, if necessary. Looking at you, Banting. So let me start with Keith here on my right. And I know Keith very well. That's why I'm being just so informal with him. But Keith, how do you see the role of trust and social cohesion within the Canadian context? I think it's already on. It should already be on, probably.
Oh, is it on now? Ah, okay. Well, thank you for that warm introduction, Scott. So it's a large question, but I thought, since I've been involved in research on these questions for a long time, it might be useful to roll the tape back to the early 2000s, when we were involved in a very large project coordinated by the Institute of Research and Public Policy, trying to take stock of the level of social cohesion and sense of belonging in Canada. The question was, is the model in Canada under stress? And I think at that time, the report we did, which was incredibly thick and was a great doorstop, was moderately optimistic about the Canadian model, at least as it related to immigration and the integration of immigrants in Canada. Now, this is not to deny there were issues, but one had the sense that certainly the first generation of immigrants were engaged in finding their way in the new country, that they were very proud to be in Canada and to be, in a sense, Canadians. They were very positive about the experience. There was a descent of some sort from the second generation of immigrants, the children born and raised in the country, who could see the deficiencies of Canada more clearly, who understood more clearly when the country didn't live up to its multicultural promises. But with that exception, the immigration community's response and the data we gathered was, I think, moderately optimistic. And indeed, to the extent we identified fault lines in Canada, which might be difficult to manage over time, the strongest fault lines on all of these sorts of indicators were actually the old Canadians, between French and English-speaking Canada and the position of Indigenous peoples in Canada. So in the context of immigration, the report was moderately optimistic. Now, if we roll the tape forward and ask whether one would come to the same conclusions today, I'm more skeptical. I think that that model has been under stress. It's been under stress for economic pressures, the inability of a highly educated immigration workforce, including our colleague Costanza, to work their way into professions and occupations commensurate with their training and abilities. A massive growth of the temporary foreign workers program, which raises all sorts of questions about the relationship between that very large number of people working in the country and any long-term pathway for those people in Canada. If one looks at cultural issues, I think the pandemic laid bare the inequality across the immigration, non-immigration divide. It was chillingly stunning how clear the patterns of the incidence of the disease were. I think that the Black Lives Matter movement resonated in this country and raised questions which we had not adequately examined before in that earlier conception of a successful Canada, relating to the interaction between minorities and the police services and the correction system. I could go on with a long list of issues, but the short answer to my question is that a model of immigration, which is often seen around the world as highly successful and an integration machine that works well, I think is under immense stress, and a contemporary assessment, I think, would be much more qualified, not only about relations among the historic peoples of this country, but also, I think, even the first generation of immigrants would have more hard questions for us. And indeed, we're seeing a growing number of first generation deciding this place doesn't work, can't find a house that they can afford, can't get into their preferred occupation. And the numbers who are leaving Canada after a few years is creeping up. So a less positive assessment today.
Thank you for that, Keith. And I think that the next question, which is to Falake, sort of follows naturally. You've been studying the immigration experience of Black African immigrants, which brings another layer of systemic racial discrimination to the issues of shared values and trust for a large group of immigrants in Canada and other Western countries. How do you see the tension between trust, social cohesion, and racism in the context of good integration?
Yeah, so I have been sort of exploring the whole notion of integration and good integration, you know, as you describe it, sort of from the perspective that, as Keith has explained, there are, in more recent years, a number of challenges that have, you know, cropped up. And we've seen the Canadian, you know, policies and sort of approach to settlement and integration. We've seen it evolve over several decades from being, you know, a policy that was directed at settling primarily at the time more European, you know, immigrants that came in from Europe, to then eventually embracing the more diversity, becoming more multicultural in approach, and then of course opening up and having, you know, conversations about racism and also about religious inclusivity and all of that. So all of that has been taking place. But one of the things that I have been curious about is, okay, so there has been sort of like this overload in terms of examining the issues from the perspective of the states, policies, institutions, all of that has gone on now for several decades. And anti-immigrant sentiment is rising across, these various countries. Of course, it's less in some countries than it is in others. For instance, it's less in Canada and all of that. But I have been asking myself as a recent immigrant, that, okay, perhaps I should be more reflective about, some of these problems. So if the states, they have all these, reform programs and activities that are geared at settlement, what really is going on? Might there be that there might be a missing piece on my side in terms of how I approach settlement and integration into my host country? So it is from that perspective that I have kind of been looking at it, and which is where I'm kind of taking my work. Of course, that has different implications in terms of examining, the context of historical racism, whether it's anti-Black racism or just racism against minorities in general. There are issues, of course, around also how the immigration policy itself frames immigration as being about economic growth, population growth. So it then, we then have to ask the question, okay, so these are people really, at the end of the day, to what extent can I feel a sense of belonging in a society if all they see me as is a means to an end? So there are some of these, questions, and they raise sort of like, they help us keep this conversation going, and I think it's one that would continue to evolve as situations change, not just in host countries themselves, but also even in the societies from which immigrants originate from, because they are part of, this conversation as well. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you.
I mean, is there anything, just sort of to follow up on that, is there anything in like thinking about good integration, is there anything that you've encountered either in Canada or elsewhere that you think has been working well? Not that you have to be positive, but you could also say something that's working particularly badly.
Interestingly, I can be positive, and I will be positive about the Canadian settlement and integration system, not just because I'm Canadian, but also because I think it's sort of like it does focus on those aspects that immigrants on arrival are most concerned about. So in terms of how do we get you settled into employment, how do we get you housing, so kind of like the immediate needs. But where I would say, perhaps more work needs to be done is I think that there is a global picture that is missing there. Because it's assumed that eventually with time, as people interact, here and there, perhaps they would then sort of form that sense of belonging and develop a sense of community with other members of the host community. And, there are concerns that that might not be going the way it is assumed. And there are different reasons responsible for this. And one of them also is the fact that in general, not just even among the immigrant community, but even within host societies themselves, people are becoming more isolated in general. We're now sort of like in this civic spaces are disappearing. So civic spaces where people would typically, interact, whether it's in, religious or non-religious, are no longer serving that purpose. So there is sort of like this global change that is occurring, at different levels, and it is having either direct or indirect impact on the settlement and integration experience.
Thanks for that. So just turning to you, Niels, now, in your research, you focus on the impact of shared values and the types of shared values required for trust in society. How do values and shared values play out in communities when it comes to integration and immigration?
Right. So is it on? Great. This idea that sharing an identity in a society and sharing values in a society is important for social cohesion has been gaining a lot of traction the last, 20, 25 years, perhaps a bit longer
here in Canada. And in particular in response to immigration, right? So the idea is that insofar in a citizenry, we share certain values, that's going to make it easier for people to identify with each other, and on that basis to trust each other and exhibit solidarity towards each other. Now that raises a question of, are there any values it is better to share than others in a community? And there's a lot of disagreement on this, both in, in politics and amongst political theorists. So some think that what is required is a fairly thick common identity, national culture, with components such as the language, shared history, cultural norms, traditions, and so on. And others arguing that's we don't need that thick a shared identity. So some liberals argue, for instance, that insofar as everyone shares some basic liberal principles or commitments to basic liberal principles, such as freedom, equality, toleration, and so on, that's sufficient for having the relations in a community that are required for trust and solidarity. And then finally, some multiculturalists argue, well, that's not quite sufficient. We need to also recognize each other's differences. We need some minority rights and so on. And so there has been a debate between, or about whether some values are more conducive to social cohesion than others. And what I, with some colleagues, have found in our research, and other studies seem to suggest this also, I think, is that in particular, while liberal values, and in particular multicultural values, do tend to correlate with high levels of trust and solidarity, less so commitments to a national culture. So basically, it's the idea that we don't need that thick a shared
as we
identity.
engage in our
Okay. Yeah. So so to cut the long story short, it seems to me that certain values are indeed more conducive than others to social cohesion, and in particular liberal values and multicultural values. I don't want to say that this is the only thing that is important for a community to work and for social cohesion, and perhaps other things are more important. I certainly think that other things are important, such as socioeconomic equality. I think certain kinds of institutions in a society are more conducive than others. In particular, kind of universal welfare states seem to work well. I think contact between outgroups, immigrants and natives is conducive to social cohesion as well, at least under certain conditions. So I think shared values may be important if they're of the right kind, but other things matter as well.
So just sort of picking up on maybe that contact kind of idea, are there things that communities can do to kind of actively create spaces where different kinds of values can be shared and transformed and kind of communicated?
Yeah, so I think contact, I mean, this is not my idea. Many people have been arguing this, but contact of particular kinds seem to be particularly conducive to trust. Contact that involves cooperation on relatively equal terms seems to have a greater impact. So, and there are some studies that suggest that schools, for instance, might be particularly conducive to trust and also to solidarity. So, I guess I tend to think I often take a state perspective on these issues, but I tend to think that the educational system is probably quite important in this regard. Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of fits nicely, or it's a nice place to turn to Zainab, who's you've been one of the champions of bringing a multicultural perspective to the forefront in St. John's through your work with the Timbolo Festival and the We Care Foundation. How do you see the role of trust, social cohesion? Pardon me. How do you see the role of trust and social cohesion in building an inclusive community here in Newfoundland and Labrador?
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to face the public or the crowd, sorry. So I think the role of trust and social cohesion in building community or creating a vibrant community is very, very important. And for us in the Tambolo Multicultural Festival and Newfoundland and Labrador Circle, as well as We Care Foundation, we truly believe that we have to do something to ensure that we achieve our goals regarding trust, social cohesion, to create a vibrant community for immigrants and the local population. So I'm going to give you briefly what we've been doing as an organization, the two organizations actually. So for Tambolo, many of you don't know, but I'm going to reveal today that we work with the governments of all levels, the federal government of Canada, the provincial government of Newfoundland and Labrador, and municipalities, the city of St. John's. If we are in Ganda, we work with the town of Ganda. And what we do is that we organize multicultural events and activities. And the goal is to promote this trust that we've been talking about, because as newcomers come here, the local population are, I don't want to use the word suspicious, but they don't know these people. Some might be coming from the Middle East, and the media has told them that, oh, these people are quote unquote terrorists. So they just believe the media without interacting with these newcomers who are coming from the Middle East. Newcomers coming from Africa, you'll say, oh, these people from, I will quote shithole countries. So they don't give them even jobs or give them due respect because they don't know them. They only heard about these people through the media. So what we do is that we try to bring the local population and the new immigrants together under very festive and friendly atmosphere. So we'll create multicultural variety concerts. We'll create festivals where newcomers and the local population or people from the local population will perform their music if they are musicians, will dance if they are dance performers, they will sell their food and crafts if they are food and craft vendors at all our events, no discrimination. And we've seen over the years, for the past, I would say 20 years, we've seen newcomers and the people from the local population bonding and getting to learn about each other through food, through music, through traditional dressing, through all kinds of cultural activities. And that helps to create not just trust, but the newcomers. We've seen time and time again that new immigrants, they appreciate this. They feel accepted, they feel respected, and they feel that they should stay here because they have something to contribute culturally, socially, economically to the province, especially Newfoundland and Labrador. So that's what Tambolo in particular try to do that across the province. And we are really, as I mentioned earlier, very grateful because the provincial government has been very supportive. We organize so many, not just concerts or music, we do programs, we do empowerment programs, business enhancement for newcomers or new immigrants. We do other training that will help them to get jobs. A lot of the artists who have come here, either musicians from Ukraine or from Saudi Arabia or from Syria, from different African countries, they participate in our events. And we not only showcase their cultures to the local population, but we also pay the artists. So they get paid. If you are an artist and you are, or a musician, we recruit you. As long as we know that you are a musician, we recruit you and you perform at our events. People get to see your music, learn about your culture, and you get paid. And we do that for all new immigrants. The other thing we do to create or promote social cohesion or inclusiveness or integration is to make sure that the local population also feel comfortable with the new immigrants. And we don't do it through like legal way or through like not taking them to court and say, you must accept this newcomer. No, we make them feel that, look, these newcomers are your friends. They are here to live with you. Together you build the economy. Together you build the society. And so we also allow the newcomers to learn about Newfoundland culture. You will be surprised if you've seen our videos at whether Conception Bay or in Uganda, you will see someone from Kenya dancing traditional Newfoundland dance, or an Inuit performer dancing East Indian dance at our event, just for them to test, feel, and experience another culture. So that, I think, we feel that it helps to promote unity, trust, and social cohesion, and help immigrants to not only integrate, but want to settle in our province and not move to other places or feel isolated and depressed. Sorry.
No, that was wonderful. So maybe turning a bit from culture more into economics. Constanza, you've been a tremendous voice in the community advocating for the role of immigration, both in terms of the enhanced culture of the province, but also its economic sustainability. In your work with new immigrants and newcomers, how critical do you feel these concepts, particularly trust and social cohesion, are, and what does successful integration look like from your perspective?
Okay, so, well, they are essential. They are key. I always believe, I moved here 8 years ago already. This is my home. I love Newfoundland. Take time to get in love, and to me, but it's the sense of trust. I always say that Canada is a brand for immigrants. You see Canada as a place of opportunity, transparency, safety. So you come here with a lot of expectations. And I think this is the challenge for the country. Now, when you go to big provinces, it's more easier. You find your community, even food, more connected if you want to travel. And a difference with that big provinces, Newfoundland, we know the call is really intentional. We need workers. You know, we need that young families, and we need that you have children, because we have a problem here of population. So you receive a call, you receive an invitation. And as any host that make an invitation, you come here with more expectations. And that is the problem. The problem is when that fails and you lose the trust in the system. So when I moved here, I couldn't enter to the labor market. I didn't speak English. I didn't have access to English classes. I approached to a big organization and they reject me because I didn't qualify, because you are not an immigrant until get your permanent resident. So yeah, then attend random classes to learn about Halloween, about Christmas, about the weather, but didn't help me to find a job. So when I get my job in Starbucks, I learn English there. And then I realized I need to do something else. Literally, nobody would be helping me. So I start my business, and that being successful today. And when I had the opportunity to hire in women's, I realized that I couldn't hire people because I am not a permanent resident. I cannot incorporate my business. So then I need to give my control of the business to a Canadian friend to be able to incorporate. Then suddenly this changed, thanks God, and last year, and I get control of my company again. And since I incorporated business, I was able to hire and I was able to grow my business. So what is the sense of trust in this system that is not ready to welcome people? So you lose the trust. And then when people leave, it's really easy. It's not like you don't need to invest more money in immigrants. It is do the job, you know, and do it effective. Make programs for entrepreneurs. Doesn't matter how many immigrants open the business. That is what matters. Then the trust in Canadians about how we are injecting in immigrants. And then you see, well, Newfoundland and Labrador is investing and then people leave. So that is not fair. So you lose the trust on the system. Then the social cohesion. We know that monopolies are bad, right? Everywhere. That is public knowledge, right? So then we don't have a collaborative social immigration ecosystem, in my opinion. We have centralized a lot of services in key organizations. That is good, but the lack of collaboration, because the system creates kind of a competition between immigrants. They call us clients. You are my client. Oh, no, you are my client, you are not my client. So it's really confusing for an immigrant to see yourself as a client and see yourself rejection, but not connection. So then you feel alone and you lose the trust. So Newfoundlander is beautiful. It's a great business. I really, it's my baby. But Newfoundlander is a symbol of protest to say, I need to do it by myself. Nobody helped me. Things are happening, are moving, but we need to do better because we are competing with other provinces. And it's not enough. And if we believe that it's enough, we have a problem. And when we talk about immigrants and how to solve the problem, let's call immigrants. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of organizations that advocate for change. And we need to advocate for change and recognize problems to move that. So then you have an integration, which is the last piece of the question. That is how you create integration, with trust, with social cohesion. And I try to treat my employees, my staff, my members as a peers, and provide them opportunities that I wish to have at that time. And I hope that they stay in Newfoundland because they trust in the system, they trust in this province. So I believe that is essential. I believe that is so much work to do. We can check other provinces, how they are doing, and really reply good practices, not just live and carry on problems. And bring people, welcome people, easy. Return them, that is a challenge. And there is our numbers. We improve, yes. Well, let's compare it with our neighbors in other provinces. We are successful? I don't know.
Thank you. And it's kind of natural to turn to Ala, who's partially, I think, maybe the audience for some of these concerns and facing some of these challenges. But anyway, as someone who's relatively new to Newfoundland and Labrador, and as newcomers from Ukraine, your experience, I should say, as a newcomer from Ukraine, your experience has likely been quite different from people who've chosen to immigrate for work or for school specifically, or if that's when that's been entirely their motivation. So what is your experience of integrating into a new community been like, in this one specifically, and what role would you say things like trust and social cohesion and shared values, how have you encountered that?
Before I answer a question, I would like to say that, yeah, we're a little bit different Ukrainians from another workers, but we are the same workers because we don't have permanent resident. We just have visa and we have work permit. So if it's ended, we're supposed to leave country. We cannot stay in this country. So our like the same with workers, we need to find jobs that apply for permanent visa. Without job, we cannot stay here. So we're not like regular refugees. We don't have like where we can stay all the time. We have temporary hotels that is help stand us. Also, we don't have every month's payment, so we need to find a job again. Back to job. Also, I left hotel 2 weeks after we came because probably I was my husband lucky because we're on first plane, so it wasn't a lot of Ukrainians here and everybody was very welcome and tried to help. Also, I can speak English, maybe not so very good, but I can speak English, so I couldn't understand what people say. But for my husband, it was a little bit more difficult because he couldn't speak so well English, and it was difficult to find a job because he knew English, but he was shy to say because he was thinking like, okay, I'm not from here, my English, oh my gosh, bad, people cannot understand me, and he was shy. But so he probably 2 months tried to find a job. Finally, he found. But again, why he couldn't find so long job? Because we need full time that we can apply for permanent resident. And somebody don't give full job. Somebody give only temporary job. Somebody says that they cannot give us document for apply for permanent residence. So. But as I said, we were lucky because we quickly find where we moved, where we rent our space. Also, very much help Association New Canadians. They help us with scene, with bank card. And for me, also very help social media, Facebook. We have groups there, so I wrote that I'm a music teacher and from Holiday Music Studio, owner applies that she would like to hire me. So it's very help. And also Music Canal, one of workers from Music Canal wrote me and she asked like, how I can help you? I need this question because I was like in a fog. I didn't know where to go, where to start, like what to do, what studio write, where, what. I just came, like I knew English, I know English, I can teach, but what first step? What my first step? And my first step was that I wrote at Facebook and groups that I'm a music teacher, and thanks to Music and Ezra and Pride, and ask, what do you need? This question I need. What do you need? Because you like a small child, you came to a new country. Yes, you read about this, but you don't know what to do. What's your next step? What you're supposed to do? And we need this question from even like a lot of Canadians. I very thankful. They said, how I can help you? What do you need? And this is the main question. What do you need? It's the first question. Thank you.
Right. Well, I mean, if I could just follow up on that a little bit. I mean, so just sort of thinking about creating the kind of right kind of context for people coming in. And so what I'm hearing is that, you know, there are some basic questions that you feel it was difficult to get answers to, and maybe still is. Is there something specific you have in mind? Like what might that look like? And is it about government? Is it about the kind of broader society, civil society?
I can say, like, not my experience, but experience people who still stay in hotel. It's supposed to be temporary, but I told, I have a friend, she came with 2 children. Her husband in Ukraine, Ukrainian troops, so he couldn't leave. How she can go to work if she has 2 children? Okay, oldest can go to school, but another, like 2 years old, kindergarten is full. She cannot pay for nanny because she cannot find a job because she's supposed to stay with a child. So, like, question how she also always say me like, I cannot find a job, I cannot leave my daughter. Yeah, sometimes she afford nanny, but she cannot pay all the time somebody to stay. So I think that there is supposed to be some daycare that help people like women who came alone. Unfortunately, there is a lot of people who came alone. Is another lucky who came with husband, but with this, they want normal life too. They want safety for their children, but she won't go and rent a house or apartment. She truly won't, but she cannot because she cannot afford it. She cannot afford it. Why? Because she cannot go work. Why she cannot find a work? Because she cannot leave her daughter alone. So there is supposed to be like daycare. Another about English lesson, they say like was the same with my husband. He went to English lesson, came home and say like, okay, it's helped me a little bit, but the weather is good, but I need to go to work. I need to understand what they asked me to do. I need more specific words, specific I don't know, classes. For even maybe some, you know, speaking clubs where you can get like musician with musician, like construction with construction, I don't know, like fashion or like barmans, that people can learn specific words what they need to work, to find the work, not just to speak in a regular life. Thank you.
Thanks, Ala. So I think we have time for another kind of general round with kind of one question, and maybe you all have a chance to chime in on it before we open it up for everyone to ask questions. And so the question I'd like you guys to think about is, in Western countries like Canada, and specifically here in Newfoundland and Labrador, where we have a significant demographic issue, and some of you've already touched on what I'm about to ask you about. We talk about immigration as a tool for stabilizing and sustaining our economy and maintaining service provisions, and integration as a necessary element for the attraction and retention of newcomers. Much of the conversation, this kind of conversation, frames immigration as a means to an end and really prioritizes current residents here in the province. The framing at best sets up a very unequal power dynamic, and at worst is extractive and colonial and very much in contrary to the principles of democracy and good integration. So how can communities rectify this dynamic? I don't know who wants to start on this.
It's such a small question.
Yeah, tiny question. So I have tricks I use in class, so one of you are going to answer.
Okay, so okay, so I think maybe the goal should be changed. you know, the way in how you call and how you make a space attractive to come and change also the perception. I mean, can be different strategies in how you bring immigrants and reasons. And that is fair. I mean, probably that is the main reason why you need immigrants here. But the goal, the direction in how you send the message is the wrong piece, because we are not ignorant. You know, it's pretty obvious. And then you make this call, and in that way really tough, hey? And then you come and you see, well, really it's not what they promise. Is when you break the trust. And it is a little line between be a compassive country and take advantage of crisis, you know? And use, everyone knows here what that means. So I think, again, Canada have a brand, Newfoundland have a brand. We should be take care about it, because that is where nothing works, the trust, the social cohesion, and the integration. And then people run with places where they feel integrated by their own communities, you know? And that is a problem here. We don't have little communities. It's hard to find them. So you move to another place to find that, not to find a better weather, not to find transportation, not to find, no, that is not true. And employment, also big topic, and to feel, you know, integrate, but community. We need somebody facilitate the construction of communities. So I think the message, should be kind of make a marketing campaign, how to do it, you know, more friendly. Yeah.
A little bit complete. Friendly communities is good, but also new communities, workers, doesn't matter what, cannot be in a social vacuum only. For example, Ukrainians now stay in a hotel, so they usually speak only with Ukrainians. They in social vacuum. Supposed to be, it's good that we have multicultural concerts, but supposed to be a place like where everybody can get together and find their friend for interest. So just not thinking about, okay, I need to go work home, yeah? But you know, can come place. I'm very thankful to my Canadian friends because we have like 2 Easters this year. We have Canadian Easter. They show me how they celebrate. They show me us like we try their meal. And 1 week after, we have Ukrainian Christmas. I prepared meal. I show them how we celebrate. So I didn't feel myself that I don't belong here, because it was like our celebration with my friends. So I feel that we become more closer, because I saw Canadian Easter and they saw mine. So maybe it's supposed to be some kind of events where everybody can be together, not only talking about work or something, but just read about or speak about new traditional, what do you have, what this culture have, what this can, know each other better, feel each other better. When we play with Maria Ukrainian music, why? We could play another too, but I just want to share with people our culture a little bit, that they can hear that we not only, unfortunately, sad news we had, but it's so difficult. A lot of people ask you, how is, but when after 1.5 years, it's so difficult to speak about this because it's not stopped yet. And I want that people see that we're not just escape from war. We are much more. We can share our culture, we can share our music, and also sometimes we play Newfoundland songs with in our concert. We invite singers like Shelley Neville, local singer, and play Newfoundland. So it's mixed, Ukrainian, Newfoundland. So it's connection. Thank you.
Anyone want follow on that, or again, thinking about, how do we, the people who are already here in Canada receiving and thinking about immigration, how do we kind of get past this economic, maybe even colonial way of thinking about bringing people here and thinking differently about immigration? Balake?
I have a suggestion that I would like to propose, and maybe looking at it specifically within the context of Newfoundland and, wanting to attract other people. And I think it's important to revisit the question of why do people migrate in the first place? Why does anyone migrate, right? So we have all our food, our culture, we can't have it in Canada more than we have it back home, right? So, but at some point, I think that regardless of the reason that anyone gives, especially in terms of more recent migration, I think that most of us would agree that the reason why we have found ourselves as immigrants is because on some level or the other, social cooperation has either broken down in our countries or societies of origin, or it has been compromised in a way that, human flourishing is just no longer possible. And so we uproot ourselves, whether by choice, we call it by choice, but really, to what extent is it really by choice? So whether it's by choice or whether it's fleeing, from war, one way or another, something has gone wrong at the level of social cooperation. And I'm thinking that, okay, so if I was in a place like Newfoundland and I want to attract more people, perhaps they could market it from the perspective that we have something, we have a social cooperation project going on here. This is what it is. This is what it stands on. This is what you get to contribute. This is what you get to benefit. Maybe if they market it that way, then people can look at it and say, oh, okay, it's for me or it's not for me. So I think that perhaps that can also take us away from the whole conversation of, oh yeah, we're doing so badly on population, because at the end of the day, really, with all these other issues, why should anyone care that any province or even any country on the whole is doing bad in terms of population? That cannot be the driving reason to attract someone. It has to be, there is something going on here. It is conducive to human flourishing. And perhaps this then provides the opportunity for people in the province to look at what they have more realistically. Is it really conducive to human flourishing? Because before you can market it to other people, it really has to work. It has to already be working on the ground. And then people can see it and say, okay, it's cold there, it's foggy and all, but they have something there. So I'm going there. So that's my take.
Can I say something about attracting people? You know that the main problem here is bus system. I don't have a car. I don't have driving license. And can you imagine, I on Tuesday and at 6, but I came home at 8. Because I wait 30 minutes, it's my studio bus because there is no another bus. Then I came to Village Mall and wait there 30 minutes, another bus. So I lost 1 hour of my life just sitting and waiting. And truly it's a problem, not only for me, because I know that people maybe, I know that people like Newfoundland and also St. John's, but maybe somebody like Corner Brook, for example, but they cannot go because not everybody have a car, unfortunately, immigrants. Not everybody have like me driving license. So it's a little bit a problem with bus system, especially on Sunday, the last bus at say 6:30, that's all. So if you want to go to some concert or if I play somewhere, I supposed to call cab, but cab not cheap here. Or I supposed to again ask somebody, please pick me up. So when you live here longer, it's everybody probably buy a car, they have driving license, but when you just came here, it's very difficult to go somewhere like even from the hotel because bus system. You're supposed to wait so long. And I know that like, I don't know how it's in another province because I'm new here, but I know how it's here, even if I go I'm very probably won't go to beach, but I cannot because there is no bus goes there. Again, all the time, like you feel a little bit cut from world because you can see that everybody go to the beach, go there, wow, they have fun time, and you're sitting like, okay, if I call a cab, how much it costs go to some beach, So it's another suggestion, have better bus system.
I mean, maybe advocating for better public transportation is this one of the projects we could socially cooperate on. I think that would bring a lot of cohesion in the city. I think there'd be a lot of company. Anyone else? Zainab or Keith, Niels? Keith, yeah.
I've been fascinated by the conversation because I am struck by the major disjunction, the big gap between the lived experience that you're describing and the way in which these issues are being currently debated and formulated in our national political system. We have, it's clear the support for immigration in this country is high by comparison with many other countries, but it's high for exactly the reasons that you suggest as an economic instrument. The massive consensus in this country among the established population is that immigration is good for the economy, and that's a significant reason why there's such support. One of the debates that's been going on is about the size of the immigration program, and it has significantly increased in recent years. From about 280,000 when the current government came to power. The numbers have increased steadily, and the government is now discussing a jump to 500,000 permanent residents a year. That'll represent a doubling of the flow of permanent residents in a relatively short period of time. As I listen to this conversation, however, I don't hear an analog of that conversation going on at the federal level. I have sat in on conversations between senior officials in Ottawa and representatives of social communities who are responsible for assisting. No one actually was representing a bus company, I'm sorry to say. And they all are talking about the problems handling the existing level, the current flow, a sense of deep inadequacy because they cannot provide the sort of support that people need to navigate their way. But I don't hear, and it's possible I'm missing conversations, but I do not hear a similar buildup of support for a proposition that people need help to integrate. Indeed, what I'm hearing and sensing is the government is increasingly looking for a kind of immigrant who doesn't need it. So the enthusiasm for people who have come here as students and who graduate and get experience in Canada, that enthusiasm is driven by a number of things, but most importantly, it's driven by a sense that these people won't need a lot of the services to make the transition work. And so I fear that we're building towards a bigger disjunction. The jump to 500,000, it's interesting, we're starting to see some pushback amongst groups who were traditionally supportive of immigration. People saying, including relatively progressive economists saying, wait a minute. You're not going to make this society, individuals in the society richer doing this. You're going to make a bigger economy, not necessarily a richer economy. And so you're starting to see some pushback about numbers. But I still think this government is going to jump the numbers seriously. And I don't think I don't sense an equal determination to engage in the kind of issues that you're discussing. And so that's a kind of pessimistic observation. But it's what I think I see.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to add to that because that happened probably in your conversations. Most of the time, the people that represent organizations for immigrants are white Canadians. So they think, they hear, they saw, but they don't know. And that is what happened. We don't have a space of voice. And this is the same about, let's talk about feminism and let's bring men to the table to determine what we need. It's ridiculous. We have champions in these provinces, immigrants that are successful And we have a voice. I attend many things that white women, Canadians come and say, I come here to represent immigrants women. And I am like, seriously? We can talk. So representation matters. Usually to solve the problem, you need to connect the problem solvers with the solution. Because usually there is when you find sustainable solutions, because they understand the roots of the problem. And it's not about, I always say, like, it's such not a smart plan, because it's not about invest more, it's invest well. Intention plus action give you something. Just actions doesn't mean nothing without intention. So I think that a big piece of lack of representation of the people that suffer the problem here, practical, really like life experience, make a big difference. So.
Well, I think that's a good point. Here. We really want to give the audience an opportunity to engage with the panelists, and I think we have about 20 minutes or roughly that. Kathy, are you going to facilitate, or do you want me to do that? It's whatever you like is fine. Okay, perfect. And I can maybe recognize people. So if anyone has a question, stick your hand up, and there's one in the back, I think.
Thank you. I just got a little comment there with a question at the end. My name is Jeremiah Perry. At the risk of being labeled here as it relates to immigration, please allow me to be the devil's advocate for a second. We have in Ottawa right now a reckless leader bankrupting this country into oblivion. 8 billion and counting to Ukraine, Sudan, the Middle East, wherever. And it goes on and on and on, and not sustainable. The United States, 31 trillion in debt, and that clock is ticking, in my view, to a black hole and the abyss. I think we are delusionally trying to fix a very broken world, ultimately on our own and everybody's peril. 70 years ago, our political leaders in this province waved goodbye to our native sons. Sorry, we have no future for you. We are basically bankrupt to the tune of 42 billion, and we seem to be welcoming the world to our doorsteps. Maybe we should be trying to fix our own deficit of problems instead of saving the world. Indeed, there are a litany of democratic voices out there stirring and starting to rebel and stating emphatically that enough is enough. So folks, I believe that there is a very finite line to be drawn here. Everyone in this province needs the reassurance of being a first-class citizen, including immigrants. So my little question to you guys right now is, how do you react to that sentiment out there? Because that sentiment exists out there big time. It really do. And these are voices that mean something as well as anybody. Thank you.
Would like to take that first stab? Oh, Constanza?
Well, what comes to my mind is that, at least in this province, I never live in another province, so I don't know the rest of Canada. And I work also with employers because they are begging for people to work, because it is not a plan for succession plan for many business owners. And many business owners need to close also on the side of the succession plan, that who will take care about these businesses. Then in the other hand, employers begging for qualified professionals that are not today in this province. Clean energy comes soon, now soon. They need a really big workforce. It's not here. It's not in Newfoundland. You need to bring them in Canada or through outside to make this province flourish. So I think we need to make a distinction when, what need the country, what need this province, the momentum of economic momentum that this province is having about clean energy, tech, and all these themes, and what is the reality of population, which is a big theme. And if you have or you don't have the people to tackle that momentum. If you don't have it, you need to solve it. Now, if you bring people and welcoming, you need a strong plan. The system is broke again. I believe that if this province is not able to retain young Newfoundlanders and Labradorian, how we pretend to welcome and retain newcomers. Well, something is wrong, something is broke. But if I understand well your point, which is a little bit like why we are I don't know if I understand clear, like in immigration when we have a debt and so many challenges and economic things. I believe that at least in the employment side, and this province have a huge future. I think so, I have hope, but we need the workforce and we need to bring them. They are not here.
Okay, who's next? Hands up.
Hi, thanks all of you for this really interesting discussion so far. And I wanted to pick up something that I think a few of you brought up in the beginning, which is the lack of civic spaces. And then I think Ala also kind of like described that there is not just maybe a lack of civic spaces, but also kind of a lack of time to attend these spaces. And so I was wondering whether you could say a little bit more about, I feel like we have different people here from different countries, how that might be in different countries, but also as immigrants or as Zainab, as someone who is trying to create these kind of spaces, what you might wish for or what you think is necessary to make these spaces successful, especially when we have competition from, TV, social media, etc., that all also incentivize us to, even if they're there, to maybe stay at home.
Who has a thought?
I think Keith was.
Zainab?
Oh, Zainab.
Well, what we can do, I'll probably touch on what others have said, but indirectly. The question that the gentleman asked earlier or a short while ago, it is true that Newfoundlanders are somehow feeling, I don't want to use the word pushed aside, or priorities are given to newcomers relatively more than local Newfoundlanders. It is possible. Humanly speaking, the politicians are human beings as well. And it is possible that, I will just give an analogy with what happened, which some people are not aware, but we were at an event that we organized, and somebody said that a lot of Ukrainians are getting jobs, which is good, but that it was just one example that person gave, that a local young person was laid off from her job, and a Ukrainian was given a job in that same place. So she became jobless, basically, but the Ukrainian was hired because there's an incentive from the government to employers to hire Ukrainians, which to me is a good thing. But perhaps what we should be discussing, or we should be doing, the government in particular, should make sure that the Newfoundlanders are not neglected or pushed aside, whereby maybe newcomers come into the province and the economy or affordability of housing or food for the local population becomes increasingly difficult. So it's hard to juggle, but perhaps the government should be able to handle these two groups together. That is ensuring that the people who are originally from here are not suffering at the expense of those who have just been brought here as immigrants. So do both, and I think that would be very good. Making sure that the immigrants are successfully integrated and settled, and the people from the local population don't lose their jobs, the economy doesn't get worse for them, and that might work. The other part that I want to mention, which was just asked about, making sure that when it comes to bringing immigrants and newcomers together, it has to be something that we all want it. So not using the colonial mentality that the newcomers will increase our population or they will create jobs, but making sure that we look at it that when we bring in, we bring immigrants or newcomers to our province. We are bringing cultural diversity, bringing something that will add like added value to our culture, to our economy, to our population, not just for to look at it like increasing population or increasing the economy, but that they are also coming to contribute. And finally, when I was a student in the 90s at MON, when I came, I wasn't planning to stay here. I was planning to finish and go back. So I didn't try to apply for permanent residence. But my roommates who came from China, India, the second thing they do in addition to studying hard is to try to get their PR. And when I started teaching at MON, like around 1996, that was when I started teaching as a sessional teacher. Some of you are familiar with that. Some of my students were already Canadian citizens, undergrads, they are not graduate students. Undergrads were already permanent residents and eventually became permanent Canadian citizens. Now I heard that that's not the case. So if you want to retain newcomers who come or who came here as international students, change that policy and probably go back and make sure that they can, if they want, get their PR while they are still students. Because if you don't, when they finish, they can wait and get a job in their own area in Newfoundland and Labrador and then apply for PR. They will leave, they will go to BC, they will go to Alberta. So that's one policy that maybe should be considered. Let's start giving the international students the opportunity to apply for PR before they graduate. That's one thing that could help. I'm talking too much, sorry.
No, not at all. I don't know exactly how strict the powers that be are about the time. I think if we were to stay on the exact schedule, we'd have 5 minutes left. I don't know if I could get a sign from someone in authority, but
I'm the only one.
okay.
Maybe, I don't know. I think we're good.
Oh, we're good. Okay.
Yeah,
So maybe we can go for 10 minutes.
I think we can go right until 5. I think that's
Would that be
fine.
all right? Okay. So are there, I mean, that's provided there's some more questions and answers to be had. So here on the, in the back there.
Thank you. Sorry, and thank you everyone for your perspectives. It's been quite interesting. I haven't seen some of you in a while. Given that the settlement experience for immigrants to this province, to this country is very unique and different in every single instance and aspect. It's very individual experience, and that stems from so many factors that we're all very aware of, whether it be language ability, education, past traumas, histories, intents. There are so many factors involved, so it is very individual. Aled, seeing you up there is pretty amazing. Last time I saw you was a little over 13 months ago in Poland, in Katowice Airport, where I saw you off on the charter flight. And seeing you up here right now is just a testament to that individual settlement and integration experience that everybody has. Not everybody that came from Ukraine is in your position right now. Very unique experiences. The focus that I have, so this is a bit of a selfish question in terms of helping solicit some advice from everyone here on this panel, is that my intention now or the task that I have in my position is to attract individuals in different countries. So set up operations in specific countries targeting immigrants for attraction and recruitment. Given that we've established that trust, integration, social cohesion are very important factors in building communities, I guess the two-part question, one, is it possible to engage that process prior to arrival for newcomers? Constanze, you did mention about what was promised and what's delivered. So building those expectations, managing expectations of people pre-departure from their source country is one thing. So is that possible in each one of your perspective and your expertise? Is it possible to engage in that process of building trust, creating that integration, that pathway, and facilitating social cohesion? Is that possible prior to arrival to this province? And I appreciate your answers.
Let's off from my talking earlier. I want to actually say it's possible, and that would be a very good initiative. Like as we talk with newcomers, whether from Syria, Afghanistan, Africa, or Europe over the years, a lot of them, they arrive here and they experience cultural, social, and economic shock, partly because while they were in refugee camps, the UN agencies and both local, like the representatives from their own countries working in the refugee camps to process their immigration papers, they don't give them enough orientation. They don't tell them the truth, if I can say. Someone will probably, oh, I will give an example. People who came from Sudan, years ago as refugees, government-sponsored refugees, they thought that they can come here and if you are 15 years old, have spent 5 years in refugee camp as a Sudanese in Kenya as a refugee, when you come here, they didn't know that that 15-year-old will be put in a class that suits his or her age. And meanwhile, they couldn't even speak English back home. They were so they are not familiar with the educational system in Newfoundland and Labrador or in Canada. They are not familiar, their English is not good. They don't know technology. So they fail, understandably. The teachers do their best, the high schools do their best, but they can't make it. So they end up dropping out. So that becomes like an issue that should have been addressed before they came here. And that means that as you, for example, now, you've been in Ukraine or in Poland to bring the Ukrainians, you must have oriented them or given them information about what to expect when they come. But in many other countries where refugees or immigrants are brought, they are not given enough information or honest information. Another example is someone coming, and we have a lot of them, and they came as doctors from Syria, from Afghanistan, from other countries as immigrants. But if you are a doctor and your education is not acquired here, you cannot practice. And that is true because for safety reasons, I wouldn't go to a doctor who maybe studies somewhere that I'm not confident, so weak. So they need to know that, okay, if you come here as a medical doctor or as a nurse in a country somewhere other than Canada, when you come, you need to upgrade, you need to be certified, you need to do some professional training in order to qualify. If they know that, they will either decide to come or not. So some of them out of desperation, they will come, but then the government should provide them with the resources so that they can upgrade their skills, because most professionals who come here, they end up becoming, taxi drivers, or they work in McDonald's, but they are highly trained, highly educated in their country. So if they come willingly, or if they know that, yes, when you come as an engineer, you cannot practice, but we will help you to acquire the necessary skills that will qualify you to practice in Canada, then you can come and we'll help you. So that needs to be communicated. Now, in terms of making it possible for them to be aware or just to be prepared to come to Canada as immigrants and work, it is possible to do it before they come here. Set up groups like you, you are in Poland, set up another group in Afghanistan, in Nigeria, where I come from. They're like amazing engineers, lawyers, people in technology. Go there and work with them and make sure that they are ready to come to Canada, and they will come and they will contribute. Sorry, I talked too much.
Yeah, I can add a little bit. I think a great idea is like first, the trust. How you generate trust is between peers. If I see a Canadian talking about, hey, Chileans, come here. If I see a Chilean talking a successful story in Newfoundland, I will trust. Then the peer navigation, as soon as they arrive, you can put a peer navigation role, champions of your province, ambassador in your province that help and take a group, 10 people, can be by volunteer. I'm sure many people will be able to do it, to navigate and settle and take care about the family. The same employer can be educated in that way, not just only hiring the partner, what your partner also do. Your children go to the school, you have after school, you know how to apply to a daycare, to a subsidy. No, you don't, okay, I will help you. So I will say the trust is key. You can do that, taking people from that specific places that we will go and bring them with you. Or let's make a video and in the same language that generates trust, right? When you relate to the other person. So I think that can be an idea, that I really great. I like ideas. I mean, these are solutions. It doesn't cost a lot of money for the system to do things like that. So.
have time? About settle up. Yes, I want to say that probably I'm lucky, one of lucky Ukrainians who settled us so good. Thanks to government that they gave opportunity to come here, free charter, but also because I knew English, as I said, and also because of people. I'm very open person and I try to find connection. I wasn't ashamed to ask about help. I found a musician in Facebook and just wrote them, "Hi, I'm Ala, I'm pianist. I'm sorry that I bother you, but can you help me?" So another, like, don't be ashamed to ask about help. If you need something, and nobody can read your minds and nobody can say what you need. And I very appreciate that everybody answer me when I say like, "Hi." The same with musical, and Marianita asked me, "What do you need?" I say like, "Can you help me with this? Can you explain me how everything works here?" Because in Ukraine, it's mostly classical music. Here it's a little bit different. So don't be afraid to ask. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we're about out of time. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you all on behalf of the Harris Center and the Department of Political Science and also the organizers of the conference and participants who I know we're really happy to hear from you today and your kind of stimulating responses to the questions, and also for audience members for all of your interesting questions, and yeah, for coming here this afternoon. And so we have a reception now with snacks and things like that. So, but once again, just a round of applause for our group.
So thank you all. I'll just say a quick thank you to everyone. It was an excellent discussion. We could have kept going, I think, easily. Thank you to the funders too for the stacks. It's not something that normally for Harris Center events we're able to do, but thankfully we had some international support for the conference itself, and that's been a great addition to today. Anyone who's been listening online, thank you for attending, and anyone who wants to share it later, you can. It'll be on the Harris Center YouTube channel. And we did have one comment online that we didn't get a chance to answer the question, so apologies for that. But I read the question, and the gist was something to the effect of forming a working group to kind of brainstorm some ideas. So I'll follow up on that with the person who sent the email and see maybe if there's something that we can kind of carry the conversation forward. So thank you, guys.